The Land Conservation Meeting. First item on the agenda is roll call.
George Bousset,
Here.
Gary Eater. Is Gary Eater online. Pat Kinney,
Here.
Jim Schultz,
Here.
Charlie Ortman,
Here.
Jerry Richardson.
Next, we have introductions. Is there anything special about that? I know I see one person here I haven't seen before.
Yeah, if everyone could just go around and quickly introduce yourself. And then Ethan can also introduce himself and his affiliation.
Okay, I guess I'll start it off. I'm Jim Schultz, elected chairman of the Land Conservation Committee.
Charlie Ortman, citizen rep, about 13 years of experience. Been here a long time. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to try and answer them. Thank you.
George Bousset, Ashland County Supervisor, District 14, which is the northern part of White River and the western part of Jingles.
Jerry Richardson, citizen rep.
Pat Kinney, County Board, the area up by Northland. And now that George Micka has finally retired after 32 years on here, I guess that makes Charlie our institutional memory.
That's bad news. I don't have institutional memory of my own stuff.
Ethan Rosing, I work for USDA Wildlife Services, and I'm administering the Wildlife Damage Abatement Claims Program for Ashland, Bayfield, and Iron County, so.
Matt Bolin, agriculture technician based out of Ashland County, but I cover Douglas, Bayfield, Ashland, and Iron County.
And Mary Jo Gingras, Land Conservation Department. Thank you. And
Carisha Flint, I'm the administrative assistant for the Land Conservation Department.
Okay, number 3 is public comments. Any public comments online? Being none. Approval of the minutes.
Move to approve.
Bousset, second.
We have a first or nominate motion and a second to approve the minutes. You have to say aye. All in favor, say aye.
Any
Aye.
discussion? Say any discussion after
Ah.
the motion.
Any discussion on that item of the agenda?
who made the second?
Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to,
George can-
George, question?
Did we just approve the minutes or just approve the agenda?
Minutes.
Well, I'm assuming it was the minutes there. Did we?
Yeah, item number 4 is approval of minutes.
Have we approved the agenda?
We don't even have that as a agenda item.
Meaning we don't have to, because it's not on the agenda, we don't have to bring it up? Okay.
Would you like to see that listed on future agendas? We've never actually had that ever in Land Conservation Department.
Yeah, it's on every other agenda that I've ever been, and so we probably should have had it.
Sure. Now, where does that come in the order?
First thing.
Right after comments, I think,
After public comments?
unless someone feels otherwise.
Before approving the minute.
Okay. We can make sure that that's on future agenda items, no problem.
Okay, then we'll go on to number 5, discussion Action items. And first on the list is approval of the 2025 budget.
Make a motion to approve the budget?
Charlie makes a motion, approve the budget. Is there a second?
This is Pat, I'll second.
There's a second. Any discussion on that? George?
I would ask, maybe Mary Jo, could you summarize the year-over-year changes for us?
Yes. We also are going to review the wildlife damage budget because the numbers that I put in were tentative numbers. And Ethan has the actual numbers. So we might have to make a couple amendments to that, but I'll go ahead and summarize the budget. And I have another copy that might be a little easier to follow. I have this out. This is typically how I have developed the budget in the past. And now we're using an electronic system, so everything's online. I do have wildlife damage on the last page here. And that's where we can make some edits.
I have copies of. Did you get the one that's sent to?
Not, I've been crazy the last couple of days.
Yeah.
Can I see a copy of that? Thank you. Okay, so the first page there is the revenues. And in your packets, this would be listed on page 7 of the packet. Let's see. Actually, on page 6 of the packet. So the budget printout from our financial system looks like this. It has a picture of the courthouse at the top. And this would have been in your packet on page 6. And the first The first 15 items are all sources of revenue for next year. Those revenue sources are also reflected on the front page of the packet that I just gave you, which is a little bit easier to read. But those are revenue sources that come from state and federal sources. Many of these are reoccurring grants that we receive year after year. All of these grants that are listed on this revenue, we do have to apply for, but some of them are non-competitive sources, such as the grants that we receive from DATCAP, our Department of Agriculture, Trade and Consumer Protection. That funds our staffing. It also provides our money for nutrient management payments that we pay out to farmers. Those are listed about 3/4 of the way down on this front page. And it's listed as state grant, DATCAP, SEG, NM, nutrient management or farmland preservation. So we'll be giving out about $30,000 next year in nutrient management. And then we also have a $14,000 grant that we'll be using on updating our farmland preservation plan next year. That's a 10-year plan that's due for renewal. The NACD county reimbursement, we receive a federal grant from the National Association of Conservation Districts to fund our agriculture technician program. This year, we did not receive full funding. So Ashland, Bayfield, and Iron counties, Douglas counties are all contributing a small portion to that. And that would be the share from Iron, Douglas, and Bayfield that they would be reimbursing us for the guesstimate amount for next year. We have not applied for that grant yet, so we don't know what we're going to receive. or what the shortfall would be, but that's a guesstimate on the amount of reimbursement that we would receive from the counties next year. Everything else there is pretty self-explanatory. Down at the bottom, the vehicle rental, the agriculture technician program rents our work truck. So we charge that grant a rental for our truck, and that's a source of revenue for the year. Are there any specific questions on the revenue sources?
Yeah, you raised the point about the truck. Is there any future feasibility for the truck being used to become electric vehicle?
We have not had that discussion. We just purchased 3 brand new vehicles in the first 3 years that I was here. So our vehicles right now are a 2019, 2020, and a 2022 Ford Edge. So they're all pretty much still brand new vehicles. So if we wanted to, consider selling them, that's something that could be open for discussion. One thing that we do have to keep in mind is that Matt hauls our no-till planter, which requires a certain amount of horsepower and towing capacity. We also tow a boat for most of our work in the summer. So if we were going to consider an upgrade to an electric vehicle, we would have to make sure that we can still use it for the work that we need to get done.
I simply raised the point because there may be opportunities for future grant funding. The federal infrastructure plan is a 10-year plan. And so maybe we're still pending on a large grant proposal for Ashland County that included some of the townships, which included, charging station at the town garage, microgrid, solar power, and in some cases, 1 or 2 cases, I think, electric vehicles. So not a near-term question, but something to keep in mind if that grant funding perpetuates over the next, 5 or so years.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Any other questions on the revenue page? If not, we'll turn to the next page, the Land and Water Conservation Department budget worksheet. There's a lot going on that page. This budget coincides with page 7 of your packet printout. And this would be, in your packet printout, this would be accounts that start with 01-6050 and then all the 57-410 accounts. So I have quite a few notes on that page that are linked to different sections. So the first set of notes refers to the employee education and training account. Those are state conferences. Those are technical meetings and conferences that our staff attend throughout the year. If anyone has any specific questions on any of those items, I'm happy to answer that. I feel that it is incredibly important to continue receiving professional development for all staff and encouraging staff to attend new or innovative types of trainings so that we can remain current with standards, conservation practices, laws, rules, and keep our staff engaged in professional development. Yes, George?
I just can't follow where you are on this handout that you gave us.
So the first block
Okay.
of notes has an arrow that drops down to the employee education and training line. Yeah, I mean, most of the items are pretty self-explanatory. Do you guys want me to take the time to go through every single line item? No, okay. The smaller note block that lists 2025 numbers, that arrow coincides with our memberships and subscriptions. So we pay a membership to our state Wisconsin Land and Water Conservation Association. That number is listed at $1,475. There's other memberships listed in that little note block that we pay annual dues to. NACD is the National Association of Conservation Districts. Are you guys following me there? NWLCA is the Northwest Wisconsin Land and Water Conservation Association. That's our area meetings. The SOC is a standard oversights committee at the state level. They work on developing and updating standards for our conservation programs. We have a Great Lakes Committee in there, and Envirathon is a statewide high school education program that we help fund. So that membership and subscriptions line comes out to $2,450. Our travel line, a couple lines below that, that includes over $2,000, and that's kind of, all of our travel includes meals and hotel lodging. That would be for state trainings. Environmental education, that has $3,800. And then that has a drop-down arrow listing to some of the things that we fund through there, a well testing program. We're gonna do field days through our ag technician program next year, so we have some funding in there for that. Clean Boats, Clean Waters, educational kits, we use those with our summer interns. Scott's gonna be working on a fishing line project next year with high school kids, where we'll be building units that will be placed at boat landings to collect used fishing lines, so it's not dumped in the lake or dumped at boat landings. Couple more lines down below that is rent, $8,000. And then there's a drop-down box down at the very bottom that shows what the rent is and the share that will be split between the Land Conservation and the National Association of Conservation Districts grant. We also have a storage unit out west of town at Don's Storage, where we store our boat all year round. We store it there even in the summer, so it's not exposed and sitting out in the sun every day in our parking lot. And then below that is all of our revenues. Once again, we already reviewed those on the front page. And then at the very bottom of that page are our other programs that are not included in the land conservation list at the top. That would be wildlife damage budget, our tree and shrub program. GLRI is our Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. We have $140,000 that we'll be working on another post-assisted log structure project next year. And then our ag technician program and no-till. Any questions on that page at all?
Pat?
In the middle under salaries and fringe for computer expense, you've got 3,000 in this spreadsheet, but then the arrow has 2,600 and 385, which add up to 2,985. Is that?
Just rounding up.
Right.
And our auto tab lease tab this year was like $2,625. So I'm accounting for a little bit of increase next year that we don't know about yet.
Charlie?
Could we let the record reflect that, Mr. Hayes? Thank you.
So Mary Jo, at the top, you got 2.5% increase, 2025 proposed. So 2024's expenses would be roughly 2.5% less, or does that vary, in comparison?
The 2.5% increase is specific to salaries.
Only?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And I'll make sure to remove that for next year. We're really not using this form anymore. I use this form because it's a little bit easier to read than this. Plus I can put the notes in here for you guys. But yeah, the 2.5% increase only applies to the salary line, and that's set at the county board level. Okay, the next page.
Pat?
Appreciate, could you give this
And the
to Gary?
healthcare is an estimate right now of a number. There's a finance meeting September 12th where we'll have more information on the actual numbers.
Page.
So those are estimated numbers at the moment, but they're not final. So.
Correct. Okay, the next page in that packet that I handed out starts with, there's not a title on it. It looks like this. This would be our National Association of Conservation Districts, the NACD. This is our Ag Technician Program. And on the far right-hand side, I'm guesstimating that we're gonna be funded at our grant request of 75%. So on the far right-hand side where it says short, $15,464, I'm guesstimating that that is what the shortfall will be for the 2025 grant, but I won't know that yet until the end of this year. We've applied for this grant for 4 years in a row now. And this year was the first time that the feds did not have enough funding to fully fund every application that was out there. So we received about 22% less than we requested. So for next year, I'm actually increasing our request above what we actually need to try and account for the assumption that we're going to have a shortfall. But if we do have a shortfall, that's what the breakdown would look like for each county to help fully support the program. And then each budget line has the associated budget that we would need to run that program for next year. Questions? Okay. And then the last page in the packet is the wildlife damage budget. These numbers were based off of this year's budget and a guesstimate that I had for next year. I did not see the actual numbers until right now. So we're going to make a couple adjustments to this. The salary line that I had listed there was $18,724. And then Ethan, am I looking at page 2? But the county, the county's only paying, I think, the salary and not the USDA Wildlife Services.
That makes sense to you, I guess. You want to pay maximum amount of
Okay.
I don't really just have that really good business strategy.
Yeah, so I think what might be easiest here is I don't know how we want to do this. I don't know if you guys want to approve the budget that I developed, knowing that there's going to be some changes, or if you want this to be put on a future agenda, which we probably won't meet again for a couple more months. But the thing to take note of with the wildlife damage budget is that it's 100% reimbursed. So whatever we pay out, we get reimbursed for. And we have a $1,200 payment that comes back to the county for us to administer all the paperwork part of the program. So the $1,200 is above and beyond what we actually pay out for programmatic expenses.
So Mary Jo, with regard to that question in summary, can you just tell us what the year over year is for the county levy? And that'll give us some context.
For the wildlife damage
No,
program?
for the total budget.
Oh, the total budget, the levy is on your second page at the very bottom.
What's the year over year?
$140,564.
That's 2025?
Yes.
What was 2024?
I don't even know.
Okay, I think we want to have that information.
Yeah.
Pat?
In terms of timing with things, the administrator wants the county board to approve the budget. I believe it's the October 29th meeting. The notice has to go in the paper, if I recall, I believe October 12th or so. So we really need to have a budget developed prior to then. With the election in November, they're going to use this room for election stuff. And so they got to lay stuff out and leave it. And so this whole thing with approving a budget's getting moved up a little earlier than usual because of the election and this room not being available. So being on finance, my suggestion would be to approve a budget that includes what we anticipate we will need on the high end. I mean, whatever it is, it's better to have something in the budget that we don't need to use, because then we can, it's there. But coming back, and then otherwise that means taking out a contingency. And so it's easier to put something into contingency or back in the general fund versus looking for it later, especially with some of what we're looking at with the budget this year. So.
Not sure exactly here. Not super familiar with how this sheet works, but I know it's a 3% increase is what I was told for the budget from this year to last year.
Or is that paid out by wildlife services?
That I'm not sure. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with looking at in the past or.
Matt, I'll take that.
So-
So what I'm seeing on this budget
Right,
that's
what I assumed it's at 40.
compared to mine,
Yeah.
the budget that the DNR is presenting, or Wildlife Services presenting, is $41,248.26. So it's a little bit less than $2,000 more than what I've guesstimated. So if you look at your very last page of the packet I gave you, the first line is salaries. I have at 18,724. And I did not have any numbers to go off of. So with the 3% from last year, the actual salary number comes out to $19,632.96. Do we have extra copies of this?
No, I only wrapped
Okay.
one, but what you just said, as I follow that makes sense to me. I agree with that.
The mileage would fall under, the last line I have is travel. I put 5,000. They're coming out with $5,305. Office overhead, I have listed under contracted services. I put 4,800. They have $4,959.73. Down under abatement materials, I put 10,000. That would be for fencing and abatement. They end up having, it broke out in 3 different lines. Temporary fencing is 8,500, repellents are 500, and other abatement is 1,000. So that comes out to 10,000. That's a break even. And then for deer processing, we have $1,000 and they have $1,350. So the actual wildlife damage budget for next year would be $41,248.26. And I would recommend approving that amount as the actual.
think Pat wants to go again.
Pat?
So we could approve the budget with the number that Mary Jo mentioned, the 41,000. And then keeping in mind that healthcare, we'll know more on September 12th, what that looks like. Just how much that's going to vary from what we're looking at could be far greater than any of this. And given the timeline, we could approve this with, I guess, permission for Mary Jo to work with the administrator to make appropriate modifications ahead of the September 12th budget meeting. Because all this really needs to keep moving, because October 12th looks like when we really want to have things lined up for the notice in the paper. And that, on the finance end, that should be fine. But the closer you are by September 12th would, I think, be helpful.
Excellent. Is that a motion?
We made a motion already.
George?
Before we vote, I would just like to compliment staff on a very professionally prepared budget documentation and presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay,
I second the motion.
It's already been made and seconded.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Jerry.
all in favor then say aye.
I,
Opposed? Motion carried. Next would be Copper Falls State Park Dark Sky Designation Resolution.
I move to approve.
Motion was made to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Gary.
Any discussion?
Do we have a discussion first? I'm just curious, when this is brought up, maybe we should, or I don't know how this works. Should we discuss these items first and then make a motion and then a second for approval?
You always move and second, then you discuss, and then you approve or you don't,
Okay,
or you amend or. That's right, isn't it, Pat?
people have done it both ways. You want to avoid what's usually called a negative question. So it's usually a positive statement, like a motion to approve. And even if that person really has no intention of supporting it, gets it on the floor discussion. Because if you make negative motions like to disapprove, then what does a no vote mean? That gets confusing at times. So putting it on the floor is typically preferred, and then have the discussion.
okay, very good. There's been a motion. Has or hasn't been a motion on the floor?
Pat, there's a motion and a second.
And a second, okay, all in favor?
Only
Now
discussion.
you have
Or discussion first?
Now we have a discussion and
Okay, we'll open it up for discussion. George?
Yeah, I was pleased to see this on the agenda. Kind of thinking about it's kind of tangential to our responsibilities in some ways. And I was thinking about are there any other committees where this really belongs, but I think it's important. And for Copper Falls State Park, I think it's a really good opening awareness for the community of the significance of dark skies. I've lived south of Ashland 5 miles for 20 years and only seen the northern lights once because of the light bubble coming from Ashland, and to improve awareness in the community of the importance of, downlighting in farmyards, house yards. I mean, a lot of people want light for their sense of security, but we can do it in a better way. And if we can promote better way of avoiding what some call light pollution, I'm not sure when light is pollution and when it is not, but in any case, I think it's a really good step forward.
Pat?
Well, the farm I grew up on is 16 miles or so as a crow flies, and in that time, the light pollution with the northern lights and seeing the skies, the Milky Way is, it's certainly increased in my lifetime. It is neat to see the stars at night, when we're out there, because for the most part we can, nicely. But I had a couple practical questions. What about the Park Service? If they've got people coming out there at night, is that going to be staffed? And then ironically, we're trying to avoid light pollution, but if people are driving out to see a dark sky, you've got car lights on as people come and go. How does that impact? And then maybe on a practical sense, if you're now sort of encouraging people to go out there after dark, I'm just thinking about sometimes people go out and, they do things they shouldn't do or do them in excess. Just to make sure on a practical level, all those things are considered for staff and cleanup and maybe they're organizing some nights where they say, hey, get out by, 9, 10 o'clock at night, then everybody can turn off their car lights and we'll spend some time and maybe, whatever, but and then I'm thinking about Bayfield County too, with the Bayfield area with the cell towers. And the more of those you get, the more distracting that is as you look at the dark skies. So that's a related thing, is we need cell towers for public safety among other things. And so how do we get that in there? So there's that service too. So.
Yeah, I mean, to address a couple of your points, like, Copper Falls would be responsible for whatever their open and closing hours are. I don't know if the park closes at a certain time every day. This is basically a template resolution that came to us from the international. It's a template put out by the International Dark Sky Organization. And Jim Brennan from the town of Morse is the one that's really instrumental in trying to get this designation for Copper Falls. So he's been working with Copper Falls and the town of Morse. And he brought this to the county, asking the county board to approve it. And Dan ran it through our department because a resolution has to come from a department, from a committee, in order to be put on the county board agenda, and he felt that this was the most appropriate through our department. So I did not actually write this resolution. It was a template that I modified a few words here and there to make it appropriate for our committee. But we would not be involved in any sort of administration of this type of program or the programs at the park, or the policies or regulations that the park would utilize to offer this opportunity to the public.
Mr. Chair.
George?
Just for me to shortly dramatize this, I'm about 5-6 miles south of Ashland, and to the south over the Pinocchis, it is a gorgeous dark sky. And to the north, it's not as bad, but it's kind of like looking over Los Angeles. And people do drive distances to see a dark sky. If I want to see the northern lights, I got to go up to Bayfield County. And people do seek this out, so I think it's a good idea for the park and for the county.
On March 23rd, 2023, we saw the most spectacular northern lights I've ever experienced in my life. We live in Marengo. We have a dark sky at our house. And I'd be happy to show you guys some photos after the meeting. It's unreal what we actually saw. Started about 9:30 at night, 9 o'clock at night, and we watched standing outside till 11:30 at our house. Greens, reds, purples. I mean, it's unreal, the photos that I have. Now, it's not that likely that you're gonna catch it, because at 9:30 at night, we're thinking about going to bed. But my daughter ironically was driving home from work that night and she's like, Mom, you got to go outside. This is crazy. She saw it on her drive home. So providing this opportunity to other people, like George said, the Pinocchis is really dark environment. Copper Falls is a dark area, and this would be a perfect opportunity for a designation for them.
Charlie?
Yeah, and it doesn't make anybody do anything. It just, Copper Falls has a booth and tells you about what you can do to make the skies darker. So, I mean, it's a no-brainer to me. Thank you.
Even
Very-
if the park wasn't open, it would still be available to be able to go out there and do your own thing. And that's a good spot because it's protected also. There shouldn't be a whole lot of car lights there because there's a turnaround there and cars aren't going by there.
Okay. Any other discussion? So we have a motion and a second and discussion had, to adopt this, resolution. To make, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Number 6, agency NRCS and staff reports.
We have Ethan Rossing here from Wildlife Services Program, so we'll go ahead and let him start.
Sure. Yep. I just wanted to come in and do a quick little update, kind of what's been going on in the damage program in Ashland County recently. As of right now, I believe we have 6 participants, mostly repeat ones from past years, one new one that's been in the program in the past and just came back in now, more recently. The big thing we've been dealing a lot with, as far as damage program goes, is elk. I'm sure some of you are familiar with the elk that are living in Ashland County now. Part of these elk came from the Clam Lake herd and have moved up into Butternut area. So the last several years, 3 to 5 years, been seeing a fair amount of damage, and mainly one farm and some neighboring farms in that area. And then also now the last couple of years, the High Bridge Marengo area has a herd of about 30 to 40 elk. That was as of the spring. The herd down by Butternut was like 20 to 30. Again, as of the spring, so after calving, certainly sure if they've had more. So what we've been doing, spending a fair amount of time, is doing a couple different things trying to help with the damage in these areas. Down by Butternut, this year we did some lure crop planting, which is basically making a DNR paid for food plot on some other properties in this neighborhood. We planted 15 acres, I believe, on 2 different parcels to give the elk something to eat and leave the farmer's crops hopefully alone, while also putting repellent. We used plant skid this year on the farmer's corn, and I've been doing, I think we've done at least 2 applications, working on a 3rd one, I believe, right now. Seeing some decent results from that. It's not foolproof, but it's certainly helping. Meanwhile, up in the High Bridge area, there's another producer there that we put repellent on his crops fairly early on, and then those elk are actually collared with GPS collars with a DNR, and they're tracking the movements of those elk. And long story short, we're kind of experimenting, trying to figure out what the best way to deal with the elk problems are. And we tried, a pretty good attempt of repellents and lure crops this year in 2 different areas and kind of comparing notes. And the gist of it is, it seems like the repellents are helping, but it's one, that there's a fair amount of cost with applications and the product. And then the biggest problem is corn grows fast. So you have to do a lot of applications. If it rains, that affects it. Overall, once elk get habituated to eating it, it's still kind of hard to break them of that. So by the end of the season, we're taking notes and basically trying to summarize, is it worth pursuing repellents or not? In the past, there's been some other repellents used, some different products. So we're kind of comparing notes from that, notes from this, trying to decide if we want to try and keep pursuing repellents. Meanwhile, we also, like I said, we added lure crop food plots this year as well. And we're seeing some fairly good results of that. Like I said, the elk are actually spending a fair amount of time on those properties, eating what they're supposed to be eating, and less time at the other farmers, causing problems there. So in a nutshell, that's, as far as I know, there's basically just 2 producers right now that we're dealing with elk problems. I know in the past there's been some more. It depends, especially the High Bridge Marengo elk tend to move around a fair amount more than the Butternut ones do. So as of right now, only one farmer's being impacted, but there's potential for more. So we're just kind of waiting to see where those move around to. Otherwise, ag bear trapping, we just started 2 weeks ago in Ashland, Bayfield, Iron County. This year's been a record year, seems like, so far as bear problems go. I do all the nuisance trapping for home residential problems and egg problems as well in cornfields. This year, I think the last 5 years, it was going to be less and less, seemed like, bear problems, especially in cornfields. which could have been tied to population or natural food sources available. This year, still trying to figure out what's going on, but since about June, I've been nonstop trapping bears for residential problems, and then ag bear started 2 weeks ago. So I don't have the breakdown for exactly Ashland County. It's a lot in Ashland and a lot in Bayfield County, and a fair chunk in Ashland County. We're just getting started, doing some work for a farmer down by Marengo right now, our High Bridge area. We just started setting traps Monday. We've caught a couple bears there. Otherwise, the just overview of bear egg trapping. So this will be 2.5 weeks in as of today, I believe. We're at 65 bears. Some reference for that, perspective for that would be last year, all of egg bear for about a month and a half of trapping, 2 months almost, had like 40 to 50 bears. So we're already above that and we're only 2 weeks in basically. So nuisance wise as well, I think we've had just a ballpark number of like in Ashland, Bayfield, Iron County, like around 15, 20 plus bears around residential places and stuff too. Last year I had like 5. So long story short is a lot of hungry bears in the landscape right now. So we're seeing a lot of problems. As far as the damage program goes, especially crops are starting to just kind of get into maturity and stuff this time of the year. So people are starting to call in with problems between bears, soybeans, and deer, et cetera. So starting to see a fair amount of activity. It's looking like it should be at least as busy, if not as busier than the last couple of years for damage program participants, things going on in that nature. So otherwise, just, yeah, I guess as far as damage program, that's kind of the just overview. I guess I don't know if you guys have any questions or anything going on with that.
Yeah, just a short question out of ignorance. What's the difference between the impact of elk versus white-tailed deer? I don't understand that. I'm just.
I guess one way to look at it is, I believe, so talking to the biologist, put in perspective, one elk is the equivalent of like 6 to 8 deer feeding. So yeah, if you got a herd of 10 deer, that's fairly a problem, but you get a herd of 30 to 40 elk, like in the High Bridge area, that's a lot of product. Like down in Butternut last year, they had a max claim. So the damage program can only pay a maximum payout for damage for a producer in an individual single year of $10,000. And last year down by Butternut, producer hit that max payout. And any more damage past that, he doesn't get paid out for, just because that's all the budget or the program can pay out for. So that's why we're really trying to curb with repellents and lure cropping, trying to curb the elk damage. The Marengo area, High Bridge area, the only good thing about the elk there's more elk there, but those elk tend to like to move around. They're a different strain there. I think they believe the Kentucky elk versus the elk from before, or different kind of strain. These Kentucky elk that have moved up to the High Bridge area like to move around a lot. They don't spend a lot of time in one particular area. So what that means is maybe instead of one farmer like down in Butternut, what's happening is he gets all the elk problems basically, and no one else around him seems to have much for issues. Plus there's less food that, they're going after. It's really just him. And the elk are fine with that. The elk in the High Bridge area, they tend to want to spend a few days here, a few days there. So basically a lot of different people suffer the consequences of these elk, but it's kind of spread out more so. And so we're trying to track. A lot of people aren't aware that there's a program for elk for damage reimbursement through the damage program. So we're trying to, reach out to more people and spread the word that, hey, if you got elk problems, let us know. We can try and work with you. We're experimenting with different, ways to try and deal with the elk. We've tried, I know Matt in the past has tried propane cannons for some producers, which can be very mixed results sometimes, and it's a bit of inconvenience for neighbors in the area and stuff too. So like we're trying repellents. We're looking at next year based off the results we've already seen down in the Butternut area with lure crop food plot planning has been fairly successful by the appearance of it so far. So next year we're starting to talk about a plan for the High Bridge area, trying to find an area where we can just plant a field of probably corn or other cereal grains that the elk can just hopefully target that more so, and then again, possibly do repellents on the other producers in the area to try and make the lure crop food plots as appealing as possible and try to get the elk to spend their time mostly there eating that versus the other stuff. So, yeah, long story short is, yeah, the elk do a lot of damage compared to deer.
I'm sure you do, but do you give your, like, your bear numbers? Do you give that to the DNR?
Yeah, no, yeah. So right now we're literally, yeah, trapping bears, all day, each day. And then we record in 2 different, online reporting systems. And then, yeah, the DNR the DNR and us as well have a breakdown of actual bears caught in the counties and all that kind of stuff. And so like the next time I, come to a meeting, I'll actually, right now we're in the middle of it. So we're literally entering stuff as we go. Kind of, so like, I don't, if you're curious, like egg bear wise, like, so we're just getting started because of the way the, crops are planted this year. The producers are working with National County or like 2 to 3 weeks to a month behind producers like in Iron and some places in Bayfield County. So we're literally finishing up trapping some farms right now, and we're just starting to trap on producer in Ashland County now. So
Well, I'm just curious because it's like 11 years to get a tag now and they keep raising it and it seems like there's
Yeah.
more and more beer.
Right,
Bear
it's-
keeps going backwards.
yeah, well, yeah, I can only kind of, speculate a little bit, but my understanding is, they take into account what the nuisance bear numbers are from, the past year and stuff like that. And they're figuring out, harvest numbers and stuff. And up until this year, it kind of was like, yeah, it kind of makes sense to me. What's been going on. And now this year, I can only assume that they're gonna, see that, yeah, there's been a huge increase in this area with bear problems. And it's not just, just Ashland and Iron Bayfield County. It's all the way down into like Hayward area and over in Douglas County as well. I know in northern Minnesota, even they're having, or across the border in Minnesota, they're having a lot of issues too that I haven't seen before. And to me, it tells me that there's probably an increase in bear population that I'm sure the DNR is gonna, see through this. But also, like, it seems to me like there's a food source issue going on right now or something. I know apple trees haven't been producing quite as many apples as maybe in the past. Berries are kind of a little bit late getting to the game right now. It just seems like there's a lot of bears around, but also, yeah, the bears that are around are they're hitting corn right now. I was just talking to Matt about this. They're hitting corn that isn't even like what they really are targeting when they're in cornfields is milk phase corn. And, that's like a certain development part of the maturity of the corn. And the corn's not even into that in some of these fields, and the bears are still testing it, damaging it. And we only see that on years where bears are hungry, basically is what that amounts to. So I'm assuming that, yeah, the deer is gonna, the DNR is gonna see that, yeah, there's been a huge, almost, record breaking year for nuisance bear problems. And I can only assume that they're gonna take that into account for next year's, harvest quotas and stuff like that,
It
and
seems
hopefully
like
increase it.
On trail cameras like this, I think the winter had a lot to do with it, because like this year, it seems like, we just saw one, there's like with 4 cubs too. I think the easy
Yeah.
winter had a lot to do with, maybe
Right.
next year might even be worse.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I've had a lot of, most of my regular nuisance around houses and buildings, bear trapping, like, like in May and June and July, not agricultural. Those are usually yearling bears. And, like I said, the last like 3 or 4 years, I've been catching like, trapping and relocating maybe 10 to 15 or something like that. Yeah. This year I did that like in a week or something like that in like the first part of June. It's been a lot of yearling bears. So that tells me like, yeah, a year or 2 ago, which is ironic because it's when we had some of those crazy snow load years. It seems like there's a lot of yearlings on the landscape right now that are 1 or 2 years old. That tells me they must have had a good year of production, even with the heavy snow load. So I don't know what that means for this year with the lesser snow load. But certainly been seeing a fair amount of, cubs and stuff running around. So, one other thing too, I have is just which I can pass this around too if you guys are interested. But I have as of August 8th, 2024 wolf conflict update. Just that basically we provide to the DNR. This isn't necessarily damage program related, but just in general, large carnivores. I'm sure you guys are usually interested in what's going on in the state and like in this area. Basically, I have a sheet that kind of breaks down which actually, if you want, I can pass this around. I printed off a bunch here. Sure, perfect. Basically, this is as of August 8th, so, several weeks old already. But basically it's a breakdown of, you flip it over, it breaks it down by county on the backside there too, but, overall for the state of Wisconsin, it breaks it down for, the last, looks like 5 years. And just kind of going through total number of reported complaints, verified complaints, livestock complaints, pets, hunting dogs, human health and safety in general. Ashland County, I can tell you that there's been, one verified, wolf depredation to a 800-pound, Angus cross cow as of yesterday that I looked at by Pierce Road. That area, I don't know if anybody's been around the Pierce Road area lately. There's a bunch of flattery that we've installed for a farmer, that had a depredation 2 to 3 weeks ago, on a smaller calf. We put up, basically, there's 3-ish, 2 to give or take 2 miles of flattery going around the pasture. There's a pack of 8 to 14 wolves. I know it for sure 8 because a person in the area took a picture of the wolves through a spotting scope and sent me the pictures, and I saw it myself. I've been getting reports of up to 14 wolves in this pack. Long story short, we put a flattery on this producer. Hasn't had depredation for the last couple of weeks since we put that up, but then across the road, which is kind of what happens, is we, in theory, stop a problem in one spot and put up some kind of abatement, and it pushes the wolves somewhere else. And so the neighboring farmer suffered a loss yesterday that I looked at. So we're going to be putting up some more flattery, hopefully within this week or next week for that producer. There's been, one more, farmer to the straight south of Ashland here, about 5 miles down on Dahlstrom Road, had a Jersey, milk cow depredated, injured, and had to be put down about 2 to 3 weeks ago. That I don't know if it's captured on this report either. And then some of the other ones from earlier this season were over by the White River Dam. There's a producer there that had a couple losses as well, to some younger calves. So, anyways, long story short is there's no shortage of wolves, as I'm sure you guys are well aware. And, this year's also, I don't know if it's going to be a record year by any means, but, there's certainly, uptick in wolf problems from the last couple of years. 2021 was a pretty bad year. If you look at the numbers on here, total, reported complaints was 116 in 2021. We're at 90 as of now, but, that's certainly, can change. But this is as of August 8th each year is what that's referencing. This is not totals for the years. This is just August 8th updates through the years. So.
On the wolves, I've got some pictures out at the farm by Mason, east of Mason, and they do not look as well fed this year as in past years. Of course, the deer numbers are down. So part of all of this is there's ebbs and flows and populations of predator and prey. So a few years ago, we had lots of deer. The wolves looked well fed. Now with fewer deer, they don't look as well fed. So, some of this with cattle and stuff may be, directly related to fewer white-tailed deer after that hard winter, not last year, but the year before. But I want to ask you about the bears. I have the same feeling I think Gary does. I don't understand why the DNR doesn't issue more bear licenses. I've got bear out there too, including with cubs. And that's, on the one hand, that's fine. But all this money we put into crop damage, it seems a little insane when we've got more bear than what to most of us seems reasonable. And I don't understand why there aren't more licenses. So one of the things, as you made your comments that I think about is, if I think of live trapping a raccoon or a skunk, like it's in my garden or whatever, if you read online, it says, oh, if you move it somewhere else, it's going to have a conflict with, the raccoons, skunks, groundhogs, whatever, that have that as a territory. But then you think about food sources, you think about needing to den up, you think about that bear that maybe had cubs that's getting separated because of, the mother's in the trap. And so if you're moving these, one question I have is, and these are just general questions, where are they getting moved to? You're creating a higher concentration of bears there. if those already, insufficient food for the bears where you're trapping them from and you're concentrating them, now there's even a higher concentration of bears and not enough food. And that impacts the health of the bears in terms of survival rates. They need to find, make a den, often they have their own den that they go back to, not always. But, they have their own den and group. So there's these impacts on animals that seem like they should be part of the consideration of what we do, because if we're concentrating on the lack of food in other territories and there's all those issues, that seems to me a bit inhumane as we do that, as opposed to having more bear licenses so that we're not incurring these expenses and we're not treating animals in a way that might otherwise, it's out of sight, out of mind. We're sticking them somewhere else. So, I mean, as you talk to the DNR and stuff on licenses, I'm fully supportive of more licenses, both for the farmers, the taxpayers, and I think, for the animals themselves too, as far as reasonable populations.
George?
Yeah, just a follow-up question on the bear issue. Do we have public education for folks to be smart about how not attracting bears to their residences? I just wonder if some people aren't very good at avoiding it.
Right. So yeah, a couple things. First with that, I guess, generally speaking, anybody that calls like DNR or, if you just Google, I've got a bear problem in Wisconsin, who do I call? It should take you to our USDA Wildlife Services Dispatch Center or district office, which is Rhinelander, Wisconsin. There's a person, her one job is to answer phone calls and just do education and talk to people, and we call technical assistance. And that solves, I can't remember what it is, but it's, she gets, hundreds of calls each year, and she's got like 75 to 80% rate of solving bear calls just over the phone, which is usually just, okay, number one, no bird feeders. If you got a bird feeder bear, we do not set traps for bird feeder bears. Our protocol is if you have a bird feeder problem, take your bird feeders down, clean everything up, spread ammonia, spread bleach wherever the bird feed was, clean it all up, and then call us back in 2 weeks if you still got a bear problem. Because honestly, you're not helping the bears, you're not helping anybody by doing, by trapping a bear. It's been habituated to eating bird seed out of a feeder. So, and then also just like, yeah, just in general, like they just walk them through, here's some simple ways, clean up, per se, as far as, keeping attractants and keeping things cleaned up as best as you can. A lot of times we really suggest, playing like a radio or something like that on your porch. And a lot of times that's honestly solves a lot of our bear problems and works good for wolves too. Actually, it's one of our abatement recommendations we use is putting a radio outside as loud as, for wolves and pastures with cattle makes more sense. People's houses, you gotta be able to sleep at night. So we gotta try and find a happy medium. How loud can you play a radio? But just having human voices around solves a lot of bear problems. Like I said, wolf problems too. But yeah, just in general, there's guidance for that kind of stuff. As far as the bear trapping, by the way, that you talked about, so all these bears are being trapped and relocated, usually around 20 to 40 miles away, released on public land, so national forest, county forest. And we do try to find places, especially in years we know it's a good acorn year. We try to find big areas where there's lots of acorns or something like that for them to key in on. This time of year, I assure you, there's no shortage of food in the woods. Bear season's only a couple weeks out, so bear baits are ramped up pretty high right now. So generally speaking, in worst case scenario, these bears, we're trapping them. Unlike a nuisance bear in like June that's, trying to break into someone's house or causing some serious issues, those bears, we're going to take like 50 some miles, sometimes more if we think we need to try to make sure they're not coming back. And we generally speaking have really good success with that. Every once in a great while, which those are the ones you hear about, a bear will come back. But generally speaking, most of our bears, especially yearlings, those bears aren't coming back, and we try to make sure they don't. If they do, we've got ways we can deal with that too. But our corn bears, like right now we're trapping a lot of those bears. We're just trying to get them 20-ish miles away, sometimes even just 10 miles away. It depends on where the corn's at in the area. We're just getting them out of ag ground. So like bears I'm catching like around High Bridge area, I'm taking south down towards like Glidden or something like that, where there's no corn anywhere nearby, or over by Brule, or south of Hurley or something like that. Maybe the top of the Bayfield Peninsula, basically where there's no corn. And like I said, sometimes if it only goes 10, 15, 20 miles away some days, depending on how busy the day is. The point is that bear, to get it away from the crop ground, if that bear, if it only goes 10 to 20 miles away, if that bear comes back, by the time it comes back, it's gonna be several weeks later. And by that time, the corn is out of the milk phase. And so that's the main point of what we're doing. All the damage that's being done is done during the milk phase portion of the corn. And so if the bear comes back 2 or 3 weeks after we trapped it, at the end of the day, that's not a big deal because at that point, the corn is out of that milk phase and it's not gonna be much damage. And a lot of our producers are chopping instead of combining, so the corn's literally gonna be physically gone. And so there won't be any issues there, as well as in these areas where we're having a substantial, like in Iron County and Bayfield County, we have 2 farms right now that are having substantial amount of bear activity. That's where of the 65 or 68 bears, whatever I'm at today, majority of those coming off of just 2 different producers' farms. And those producers are getting shooting permits because the bear population is extremely high in those areas. There's definitely bears migrating to these fields from obviously, miles away. There's not normally that many bears in that area all year round, but right now they're migrating like out of the Bibbin Swamp. They're coming up to the egg ground right there. That's a hot spot right now. So yeah, we are issuing shooting permits, trying for those producers to try and knock back the population in those areas. But yeah, it's also conversations I have with the DNR biologists in the area. Hey, each year throughout the season, especially towards the end of the season, I kind of let them know, hey, this is kind of what I've been seeing. At the end of the day, I can't tell them, hey, you have to, make more shooting or hunting license permits for bears next year. But I certainly, put a bug in his ears. Hey, I'm seeing a lot of problems, or hey, it's been so or whatever kind of thing. Yeah, this year I've been kind of pounding on, hey, a lot of bear problems. Hey, a lot of bear problems every time I see him, kind of thing. And so I can only assume that that's going to be part of the consideration for next year anyway. So I don't know if there's any more you wanted me to touch on with that, I guess. But
Yeah, I know.
yeah.
Jerry?
Would it be in order for us as Ashland County LCC to send a letter to the DNR recommending they accelerate their licenses? Maybe they will anyway, but it might be an inspiration for them.
Pat?
I,
Well, discussion.
sure, I like that idea. To Glidden, I get a chuckle, Glidden Black Bears, take them to Glidden. But I think if you look at the economics of this, it would make sense to, and I don't understand, I have no idea why they're so tight on bear licenses. And we perpetually have, so much damage. I just don't understand why they don't issue more licenses. So at least they could explain that.
Charlie?
I don't understand why you don't just kill them after you trap them and give them to somebody, like the deer harvest. I mean, obviously you got nuisance bears. If you get 63 of them, those are gone that year. So it'll be all new ones next year, and you're getting them right at the spot where you don't want them. So.
George?
I have my doubts. I'm not sure that's a targeted enough recommendation. A general issuance of more licenses might not solve the problem of the bears that we're trying to deal with, which are the nuisance bears, which are in a way being dealt with. So I'm not quite there.
Yeah, I could tell you like the way it was, yeah, as far as hunters, license sales, that kind of stuff, that's all, as much as I love to be involved, that's all DNR part. So I don't have much of an influence there with that. But as far as the damage program and corn bears goes, there is a protocol for if a producer is having $1,000 or more in damage, if they have a history of that from the previous year or are likely to exceed that in this year, part of our protocol is we can issue shooting permits for, bears on those properties to try and curb where there's really, high volumes of bear damage being done. We'll trap bears as well as issue shooting permits to try and, exactly try and reduce the bears, at least in that area where there's the most damage occurring. So.
All right. Any more questions? Any more agency or staff reports?
Thanks, Ethan. Yeah, staff reports. We have written staff reports that we provided on the table. Matt, if you want to start with a couple updates. Scott obviously isn't here today. Him and Ellie, our intern, are out in the field. So if you guys have any questions on his report at all, I can try and answer those questions. And then Seth is also out in the field. So if you have any questions on his report, I can answer any project updates. But otherwise, I'll let Matt take the stage here.
Yeah, I'll wait till everyone has them because I'll touch mostly on the pictures on mine. I don't know if everyone has them quite yet. Yeah, so I'm not gonna talk a whole lot about the front. I'll wait for like the final numbers for probably like the next one. Primarily what I'm gonna talk about are gonna be based on the pictures on the back side of my report. One of the big things that's taken quite a bit of time out of my summer, I've done a lot of site visits this year with a lot of different farmers. But the big ticket item that I've been working on with people, we've done 3 field days so far across 3 of the counties. I've done Bayfield, Ashland, and Douglas County field days so far. Irons is the last one that we're gonna be doing. That is from a nutrient management farmer education grant that was applied for last year out of Douglas County. And it covers the northern 4 counties. I applied for that one again this year with the new conservationists in Douglas County. That is funds that have an additional increase for farmers to sign up for nutrient management. We got that one sent in. We found out we received that grant for next year, which is phenomenal. It's a partnership that we have with Douglas County. So that's something Douglas County does for the northern 4 that I work pretty closely with them on. And that pays for us to host these field days as well as increase some other incentive programs for nutrient management. But the big ticket one that I go for that one for is for these field days, as well as these other payments. So these 3 field days have happened. That's what I'm going to talk about. The first one we did was in Bayfield County, which are those top 2 photos. That was held in Muckwa on a beef grazing operation. It was a really great day. We had good weather. It was a nice cool day, which I was all about. And beautiful pastures out there. That was at Dave Applegren's farm. And we had some NRCS staff was out there, some APHIS staff. We had UW staff, county staff, nutrient management and pest staff was out there. We did a rainfall simulator, pasture walk. We looked at some county cost share projects that went in. I want to say we had just shy of 30 people. We had people from Ashland County, Bayfield County, Douglas County, several counties came out there, which is really good to see. People had a really good time and hung out there. So those are some of the photos from it. Gary Hahn was one of the speakers at it. He's now a ACES worker, which is a program for retired NRCS employees. It lets them get in some hours. And Randy Gilbertson, he used to work for NRCS. He is also an ACES employee. And so they both were at that one, which was a really, really fun field day. We did the Ashland County one, which is the figure 3 and 4, those middle 2 photos. So that middle left photo of Randy and I doing the rainfall simulator there. That was held at Kenny Richardson's farm right off of 112. And that one was primarily focused on nutrient management and farmer resources. So Kenny working for FSA, we talked about FSA programs, talked about some NRCS programs, talked about nutrient management, farmland preservation, talked about soil health. Once again, had some UW staff, some NRCS staff, had quite a few different staff there. Seth was there. We looked at some of the county cost sharing projects, some NRCS projects. Had really good weather for that one. We were afraid it was going to be raining up until it stopped raining about half an hour beforehand, which we were thankful that it stopped. It was a really good day. For that, had quite a few different people there, some people from Bayfield County, some people from Ashland County, mostly from Ashland County, but a couple from Bayfield County showed up too, which was really nice. And then just last night, those bottom 2 photos, we did one in Douglas County. And we held that one in Brule on a brand new farm that was focused on nutrient management, farmland preservation, and then soil health. And we walked around a new regenerative farm. They're raising pork, lamb, poultry, and honey. And so we got to walk and see how they graze their pigs. They essentially rotate kind of NRCS doesn't call it grazing. They just rotate their like feedlot and they cover it with cover crops of like kale and sunflowers and trefoil. Um, and then we took a soil sample for that when we did the rainfall simulator and it actually held up quite well. And the pigs provided quite a bit of fertility. It was pretty cool to see. People really like the sheep they have. They had some Jacobs 4-horn sheep, which have 4 horns and spotted fleece, which is pretty cool to see. We pulled some honey frames. We spun out some honey. Oh, speaking fast, slow down a little bit. Um, so anyway, that was just last night. NRCS was there, the district conservationist, Michael Blunt. It's probably why he's not here today. We were out there pretty late. And we had a really good turnout for that one as well. We had roughly 30-ish people at each of them. The people from UW told me last night that they go to some of the ones for most of the counties throughout the state, and they said that the ones we've done so far this year are about the most well attended of any of the ones in the state. That might be because there's so many other events in some of those other counties and we don't have a ton of farm events. But I like to think that we did a pretty good job. We did surveys at all of them and people seem to really like the field days that we've done. And I'm hoping to plan, being awarded that grant, we're planning some for next year as well. Hoping to do some even bigger ones next year, and advertise them a little more aggressively next year. Like I said, there's one more coming up. We're gonna do one over in Iron County. Still ironing out some stuff over there, for that. But the field days took a decent amount of time, but it's a great way for farmers to get together and talk and communicate with each other, see what different people do. And it's really like awesome afterwards for them to get to talk with NRCS staff and county staff, UW staff, and then just to commingle and actually get farmers talking with each other and talking with the resources available to them. And then learn quite a bit. It was all the events so far have been very, very good. We've had very good weather at all of them, which we're very thankful for, and have gone very, very well. Anyone have any questions about anything?
Yeah, field days sound great. Do we have any outreach to any of the county fairs?
We were gonna have outreach to the county fairs. I was gonna try to bring the no-till out to the county fair and then set up a demo of it. There were rentals for the no-till and I was gonna prioritize actually having the no-till get used instead of being parked at the county fair. In the future, I would really like to have a booth. We purchased like a type of display thing, and in the future, we would like to have displays at each of the county fairs, and we're acquiring some different interactive boards and displays to distribute between them. So it is future plans to be at all 4 of the county fairs for the agriculture programs and stuff. This year, they were not. The main thing was gonna be setting up displays on the no-till, but in and around all 4 of the county fairs, there were no-till rentals. And I wanted the no-till to actually be getting used at the time, and so it went out. The farmers that wanted it kind of took priority instead of having it sit, not getting used. But into the future, I'm not gonna plan on parking the no-till unless it's available. I'll go a different route that way. It'll be a little easier that way. If the no-till happens to be available, I'll bring it out there for that, but we're gonna go a different route and have an actual display board. And then one thing I'll note into the future too, I've had quite a bit of interest as of late and been discussing it. I think over the winter, I'm gonna ask Carisha to help me. I would like to create a 4-county agriculture like social media. There's been quite a bit of interest from people, especially out of Douglas County, but out of all the counties, there's been questions about it. It's a little bit cumbersome to try to send specific posts to each of the counties to post agricultural programs. And if I had one social media page that was just agriculture, I think out of each of the 4 ones, I could post it. Ashland County could share stuff specific to Ashland County. Bayfield County could share theirs. Iron could share theirs. Douglas could share theirs. So I think I'm going to create a specific agriculture 4-county social media. It'll probably be Facebook and maybe Instagram. Facebook for sure to start. And we can advertise all the stuff through there. We'll continue with the stuff through the mail. We'll continue with other things, but we are going to start a social media campaign as well. There's been quite a bit of interest in that. I had several people asking me about it last night too. And so hoping to push that a little bit over the course of this winter.
I do have to compliment Matt on these farm field days. This has been an interest of mine for the 6 years that I've been here. And I and other staff did not have the time to commit to putting in the effort to organizing these events. So this was one of the job duties that was created when we developed the agriculture technician program. And it's taken a couple years to get it going. Matt was able to implement a field day in Douglas County last year, had great success. So I really pushed to get this going for Ashland, Bayfield, and Iron this year. And I think he's doing an incredible job on it. I know it's late hours. He didn't get done at the farm till 9:30 last night, and you're talking an hour drive time here. He has an hour drive time back home to Cable. But I think these are really important events, not so much for our department, but to get these farmers together with their peers to be able to have conversations about whatever they want to converse about. You know, it builds networking and it builds that farm community. And we've talked quite a bit about hosting some sort of winter activities, whether it's having a meal at the town of White River Hall and just getting the farmers together. Maybe we have a guest speaker, maybe we don't have a guest speaker, but it just provides that opportunity for building community. So we have some ideas about future things that we want to build off of this. Kenny and Anna Richardson in Ashland County here, they just celebrated their century farm. They received an award at the Wisconsin State Fair a couple weeks ago. So we're thinking about what are things that we also want to do to recognize our farmers that are doing good conservation, that have a long legacy. So the work that he's starting with these field days is also going to help us build to recognizing and empowering, encouraging our farmers to continue doing good work in the county.
Pat? One of the things I read 4 years ago when I was thinking of running for county board was that to keep younger people on the land, farmers, connection to the internet was really important, in part, large part, for social media contact. So if we're gonna have that next generation on the land, we have to have social media events and connections. And for a lot of us in these northern counties, the county borders are, it's kind of like the deer harvest units, or county borders are sort of artificial. Because, you know, you mentioned Burrell, it's not that far into Douglas County. And so, you know, putting that together, like you suggested, makes a lot of sense because we often cross county borders and do that. I also want to say that I noticed in the Ashland Daily Press your story on the nutrient management plans and stuff, and you probably realize this a bit in the online edition. For a period of time, that story had the most hits, meaning it was the most read story for a period of a number of days in the Daily Press. So certainly people read that, and it's on this sheet again. And I've got people out my neck of the woods, and I'm like, geez, you know, why don't you sign up? It's really hard because there's frankly, I mean, in a nutshell, there's a lot of people that don't trust the government. And so it takes a lot of effort to keep educating people and coming back and hopefully getting people signed up for the nutrient management plans. And one of the important reasons, aside from the environmental benefits on that, is this is money back into their pockets so that they can reinvest in their land, pay their taxes, take care of the place. And that helps to keep people on the land too. And so those activities I think are important. And so, you know, thank you for that effort.
Yeah.
These field days are really excellent too, because it gets you to like actually talk with the government, and we're not scary. We're pretty laid back. We're not out here. And like, it used to be, my understanding was well before I was working here, that it was a very hard push. It's mandatory. You must do nutrient management plans. It's eased up. We want it to be voluntary. We want to work with you. We have these nutrient management farmer education grants. We have additional incentive payments that, like, it's a tool for you. We would love to have you voluntarily work for us. I don't want you to dread a phone call from me, and I don't want to dread a phone call from you. And the field days in particular have been awesome. And so many people where it's like, yeah, you talk with them on the phone and they're like, yeah, they're kind of interested. But then at the field days, so many people are like, oh, you're down to earth and we'll actually do it. Um, and it's kind of a good thing. We ordered some additional soil probes. I have every single one of our soil probes out with farmers right now, in all 4 of the counties, and they're all pulling soil samples right now. And a huge part of that is from field days. So there's a huge soil sampling effort going on right now. And a big part of that is from this farmer education grant that helps with the field days, but as well as these incentive payments on top of it. And so I think it's something we're trying to expand upon. And in that budget we just passed, I'm trying to add additional funds to keep these field days and events going, to have more public outreach, social media, as well as in-person ones, just to get it out there, just so people know. And I think it's very important to let them actually meet us one-on-one, and it's gone quite well. I get texts constantly from people. I've had probably 5 texts since this meeting started, from people, which is a very good sign that they actually are not afraid to reach out. And so we're seeing good things, and we're hosting 2 things already. We're setting up the dates. There's gonna be one in December and one in February, actual like winter sit down trainings, which is essentially a 3-day crash course in agronomy is what we call it, where people end up with a nutrient management plan, which is why there is such a push, why there's so many soil samples getting taken right now. So next year we're expecting to really have a lot of nutrient management plans done pretty well immediately into the year. It's been a weird year for pulling soil samples. It was so wet in the spring, people couldn't get out and pull them. And then people have just been trying to catch up. There's been so much hay being made all summer long that people have been very busy. And so right now they're pulling samples, but summer's been going quite well. These have taken quite a bit of time, but I think they're incredibly valuable and incredibly worth doing. And adding those stuff in the budget line like that Mary Jo did, I think will help. So thank you for approving that too.
So a couple just quick education notes for you. Any producer that has livestock that spreads, manually spreading manure or applies fertilizers to their property is required by state law to have a nutrient management plan. This was passed in 2001 or 2009. 2009, it became a state law. So we are trying to do this voluntarily in Ashland County, but I also like to let, especially our big farmers, know that this is also a protection for you. Because as you all know, farmers can get a bad rep. People can question when manure is being spread, especially if they own property on our state highways. People see these manure applications. I've had multiple calls from landowners over the years complaining about farmers spreading manure. They shouldn't be spreading, they shouldn't be doing this. And it's like, well, actually this farmer has a nutrient management plan and they're spreading it according to the safe recommendations. So these nutrient management plans can provide protections, especially if there's complaints in the future. And Matt mentioned they also can get incentive payments for a new farmer or for a new nutrient management plan. These farmers, the incentive payments that we pay out is $40 per acre. And many of these farms are hundreds of acres. So these farmers are going out and they're collecting soil samples on every 5 acres. Matt works with them to write the nutrient management plan based on the number of animals that they have and the number of acres that they're spreading on. And it's all run through a computer program. It's done very professionally and they can receive incentive payments. On top of that, these farmer education grants that he's talking about, they also can get paid for coming to a class. They can get paid for their tests and they get an additional payment when the plan is written. So we're utilizing state grants to bring that money to Ashland County to pay these farmers for their time and their efforts and their voluntary willingness to get these plans developed on our landscape. And our goal is to try and get as many acres of farmland under nutrient management plan as what we can in the county. Now, if a farmer does not have a nutrient management plan and we get complaints from landowners, that's where we start having a few more challenges, trying to push these farmers to get their plans written. If we want to, we can enforce it, but I hope that we never have to go that route. I hope we can always do it in a voluntary fashion. And then he also mentioned the Farmland Preservation Program. We do have an ag area that's designated in Ashland County. It's mostly in Sanborn and the town of White Rivers along Highway 112. And if these farmers want to, they can also enroll their land in a 15-year agreement, 10-year agreement now. It just got reduced to maintain their land in farmland, and then they can receive tax incentives on top of it. So they also get an additional tax deduction every year if they enroll their land in a farmland preservation agreement. And we currently only have 3 farmers in the county. We would like to get more, but that's an additional incentive for them as well. And so Matt is working on increasing the participation in both of these programs. And that's part of his role in this position, and it's been going great for us the last few years.
Just one quick comment. Personally, I did attend that nutrient management field night the other month, and it was very, very informative. I'm not a good farmer, never claimed to be, but it wasn't a high priority, a lot of these specifics, so it was interesting to say the least, find out what's out there and what tools that you do have. So yeah, it was a real good night. Appreciate that.
So you're going to be developing a nutrient management plan, right, Jim?
Yeah, we'll see about that. I'll put it on the agenda.
Okay, for my staff report, I'm not gonna take too much time. But there was a couple things I did want to highlight. Mostly recently, Crucia and I have been working on getting the budget developed and finalized. So that's taken up quite a bit of time. In the middle of my conservationist report page, I have a few grants that I've been working on. So we were awarded our state grants for next year. There's 3 of them that are listed from the Department of Agriculture, Trade and Consumer Protection, DATCAP. This is the most money that we will ever be receiving from DATCAP so far. The first number that's listed there is $154,918. That's for our staffing grant. That's going up $10,000 from this year to next year. So that's great. We also have our $50,000 soil water resource management funding. That's what we pay out to landowners on cost share projects. And then our nutrient management grant, $30,000. That's what Matt uses to provide incentive payments to farmers who write new nutrient management plans. And then we're also receiving a Farmland Preservation Program update grant. We have to update our Farmland Preservation Program plan next year. So we'll be working on that through a couple of our committee meetings. And then we also work quarterly on reports for our National Association of Conservation Districts grant that funds our agriculture technician program. I'm also currently working with our Department of Emergency Management, Christina Zonkowski. We are updating our hazard mitigation plan in Ashland County. That's a 10-year plan that was due for renewal. So I've been serving on the committee that's working on updating that. And in September, we will be going to public comment. There's going to be an evening session held in the town of Morse. And the plan will be open for public comments. And I can even tell you the night that that will be. I'll have to look for it. I'll let you know what that is, though. And then we're also gonna be getting ready to work on our 2025 Ashland County Comprehensive Plan. So I will be serving on a committee that will help chair the natural resource section of that plan. Lissa Radke with Extension is kind of taking the lead on that, and we've met a couple times to talk about the planning efforts for that, and we'll be launching the update of that plan. Working groups will start happening this winter. There's a lot of other items listed on the conservationist report. I'm not going to go through everything, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. And one other project that we're currently working on in our department is a field mapping software project. So we worked on a grant with Burnett County downstate to receive some funding to work on an online GIS program that will be able to map all of the conservation projects that we're working on around Ashland County. So this would include on-the-ground conservation projects. It would also include what we're doing with invasive species management. It would include all of our agriculture work. And we'll be working on putting that all onto an online map where we can actually bring it up here at our meetings. And we can show you all the locations around the county that different types of projects have been done. It will be a great tracking tool for us to be able to count up acres and number of practices that are implemented each year. And it's also going to be a great tool for education to be able to show examples of the types of things that we're doing around the county by viewing it on a map. All right, that's it for me, unless there's any question.
Seeing no questions, that's it for number 6 on the agency and staff reports. Then moving on to reports, updates. Number 7.
Yeah, this is where in this section, if we want to have any discussion, we usually have a standing item on our agenda that's climate change discussion. So we would entertain a discussion on that topic at this point if there's interest.
George?
Yeah, maybe today we can keep this short, but I just wanted to ask 2 questions. First had to do with field days and your discussions with people in the rural community, whether you're hearing any discussion from folks where they see issues emerging related to the shifting climate. And then secondly, as a department, whether you're sensing any emerging issues that we're, haven't thought too much about before, or whether it's kind of status quo.
Yeah, I mean, at the field days, everyone talks about the weather all the time. About like the drought the last several years that we had, and then all of a sudden you shift to this year where you thought you were going into the big one that we were gonna get, and then all of a sudden skies open up. And then you've had a hay season like they haven't had in quite a while. And just how farming's gotten incredibly more difficult, where they're like, oh, well, this year seems to be more like a normal year that it used to be years and years ago, and how it's getting harder and harder. I was talking with a gentleman who farms between Douglas and Bayfield County just last night. And he was saying that like he wants to get back his beef herd to what it was, but that the weather's just the climate's just inconsistent. That he's running about 20 head of beef. He'd like to be running more like 40, what he used to be. But just from drought to, he has no idea what the climate's going to be. That a year like this year, he could easily have 40 head of beef, no problem. But year to year, he has no idea what it's going to be like anymore. For years and years and years, he would have 40 head. But now he just has no idea consistency what it's going to be for production, or having to supplemental feed. So people are having to reduce the size of what they've had. It's not a great thing for the farmer, for the land. It might not be the worst thing in the world to try going down in size or to be smarter about what they're doing. The farm we were on yesterday, what's kind of neat, is we were on a regenerative one and they were demonstrating, they had just purchased a farm. It's a 130-year-old dairy farm. This is only their second year of operation and there's more of an interest in trying to go high value crops. And so they are saving their garlic from this year, all their garlic. They just planted some garlic. They get $20 per pound for seed garlic. And they're developing this type of garlic that's incredibly disease resistant, incredibly drought resistant, incredibly moisture resistant. And something like that should be able to sustain their operation and they can grow quite a bit of it in a pretty small area. And especially what I'm seeing from a lot of the younger farmers is they're getting pretty creative with what they're doing and they're diversifying what they're doing. The sheep that I was mentioning, they have Jacob's 4-horn sheep. If they butcher it, they're only getting about 30 pounds of meat, but that's not necessarily their main concern of what they're getting out of them. The fleece is like real, has a really nice pattern to it. And so they get a decent amount of money from the fleece. They have 4 horns coming off of them. And so they can sell the skulls on market for taxidermy and stuff like that. There's innovative ways they can get different niche markets. I was discussing with them at the border, they have quite a buffer of hay fields between them and the Brule River. If you look out their farm, you can see a tree line, and just behind the tree line, they're right on the Brule River watershed. They have an excellent buffer that protects the river. But they have been discussing trying to add laying hens and stuff too, and ducks and things like that. They're very interested in going into like farmers markets and trying to develop more farmers market, direct to market type of stuff. And I was chatting with them about, I know a gentleman in Cable who raises his own chickens and ducks and then ties flies and was featured in Field and Stream magazine for stuff like that. And that would be a pretty niche market for them, being right on the Brule River, right in Brule, if they could sell out of their farm store. And they're interested in that. And there are so many young farmers that are interested in these niche markets. I was talking with a gentleman at a farmer's market the other day who does black garlic. So there is quite a bit of interest from people who are noticing a difference and trying to develop more high value crops and trying to change their operations to be more resilient and diversify what they're growing, to be able to do it on smaller acreage and be more diversified. So if something fails one year, they're not reliant completely on just corn or just beans. They can be more resilient to other things. And I was working with someone who's getting like 25 pounds or $25 per pound for their bacon. But it's like an 18-month finished pig. And it's hazelnut finished pig. They eat all hazelnuts for its whole life. And it's a type of pig that doesn't root up the ground. They're grazing them in and amongst their hazelnut pastures. It's amazing some of the farms I've got to be on this year. And amazing the different type of stuff. And I would like at some point, I don't know if it's next year or the year after, to do like a 4-county farm tour where it's like a whole day thing, get a whole bunch of BART buses together and go to a bunch of different innovative farms and see some of the stuff that's going on. Seeing some larger scale dairy farms and how they're operating. Some in Douglas County are using food additives. I think I've mentioned it at a meeting in the past where they're using food additives to slow the digestion down, which decreases methane emissions from the cattle, as well as increases the nutrient uptake for the cows, so they need less feed on drought years, which is incredible. They're a certified organic, grass-fed, all pasture dairy over in Douglas County with about 100 head that sells to Organic Valley. I think kind of a 4-county farm tour would be kind of interesting. I think something like that would take a little bit of time to plan out. But yes, there is a lot of interest, and I get several people, including large scale people, they're incredibly interested. That's a very large step to take, but I think everyone's interested to some extent to try a couple fields and make that transition. Some of the old school might not be willing to, but that next generation is very much ready to experiment a little bit. And even a lot of the older farmers are willing to try doing some of the stuff. There's definitely interest out there. And a lot of it is already happening too.
Was the question specific to climate, George?
Right. So I'm picking up from what
Mhm.
Matt's saying is that risk management
Mhm.
for our agricultural folks is becoming more significant. So that sort of answers the question about what you're hearing in the field.
Mhm.
Now I'm wondering from the management point of view, whether you're
Mhm.
picking up, sensing other issues that we haven't previously talked about or been conscious of, or whether it's
Yeah.
pretty status quo.
Yeah. So there's two other things. I mean, our land and water plan does include a lot of these risk management actions, activities, how are we responding to a changing climate? So we do have a lot of activities in there that our department is focusing on, everything from types of livestock, food and grains, to increasing more water storage capacity on the landscape, restoring wetlands on ag lands that are no longer in production if we have the opportunity. But two other areas where we're noticing emerging issues are our emerald ash borer is in Ashland County. This is affecting our green ash trees, all of our ash trees. We do have large stands of green ash in and around Ashland County. And those species are likely going to be dying off within the next 5 to 10 years. So we're going to have massive stands of forests that are not going to survive this pest. So one of the things that we're asking about in our department is, what are other species that we can be recommending to landowners to be planting today? And we are offering those species in our tree and shrub sale annually. We're also going to have some special wording in our tree and shrub sale this year about ash species and the emerald ash borer, and what are good alternative species that are also climate resistant that will survive here in 40 or 50 or 60 years if we do see drastic changes in our temperatures. So that's one thing, is our forest transition, forest species transition with climate change and with the emerald ash borer. And Scott has been doing quite a bit of work on our lakes this summer, and he's seeing an increase in green algae blooms on lakes that we have not experienced in the past. Day Lake and Butternut Lake are two lakes in particular that have lots of green algae. This year, green algae can produce an irritant on skin. It can also be life-threatening to dogs if dogs are drinking. And there was a large bloom that occurred last week on Butternut Lake, and it was such a large bloom that Scott did not even put our boat in at the boat landing there because he did not want any skin exposure at the boat landing. And there's currently no signage or education there about that blue-green algae bloom and the impacts that it could have to human health or animals. Why are we getting these blue-green algae blooms? Could it be increased water temperatures? Could it be increased air temperatures? We're not exactly sure. It's just something that we have not been experiencing in previous years on our inland lakes. The National Park Service has also picked this up the last couple years out in the islands, that they've had increased blue-green algae blooms that have never been observed before. So we're not exactly sure why it's occurring, but we know that we need to monitor it. And Scott is talking to the DNR and our algae specialist with the DNR at the state about what should we be doing here in Ashland County to monitor this, and what can we do for education of posting or providing some education to the public that might be using these lakes or campgrounds on these lakes. Like Day Lake in Mellon is a very large U.S. Forest Service campground. So as soon as we found this out there last year, they went and posted information. But we need to determine with the DNR who's going to be posting education at the boat landings and what can be done. So that's basically what I have for now, George, on those topics.
Thank you.
Pat?
I'm not sure if this would be best under this item, reports and updates for other business, but you talked about the tree sales and trees. I had the forester Kara O'Carahan out at the farm at the end of July. She looked at all the different trees that I've been planting, and I've got lower, wetter ground going up to high, sandy, lighter soil, so I got, and everything in between. So lots of variety, lots of trees from Ashland County, Iowa State Nursery, and other places. And my success rate, to put it mildly, is more than disappointing. And I don't understand it for all the stuff I read, all the conversations I've had. I just don't understand what's going on, which then impacts, I like to order trees early, otherwise they might not have them. Some places you can start ordering September 1st, October 1st, that sort of thing. So I would like, if we could at the next meeting, bring in some expertise, some foresters or retired foresters. George has someone, we talked a little before the meeting. Some of what he said there is spot on from what I'm thinking is part of what I'm running into. I don't know how much of this is nurseries doing things differently, if any different than when we were kids. It seemed like when I was a kid, we planted trees, most of them made it. So I don't know ratio of rootstock to what's on top. The seed beds are raised in, you know, what nutrient level they have there versus how much of this is transplant shock. And then I think from some of what I've read, it's climate change, especially in my higher ground, where it gets so warm up there, is we look at zones for trees and plants, you know, how cold can it take it? But one of the factors I think has more impact from regeneration, and it's in that, I'm not going to get the words right, but that Northern Applied Institute or whatever, that handbook, is we get these stretches of warm weather. And no matter how much I water some of these trees, I got a 300-gallon tank and a 2 wheels that I pull behind my small tractor. No matter how much I water them, it doesn't seem to matter. And I think the problem is there's too much heat for these, for what's on top versus a root system, that they can't make that transition through transplanting and getting established. And they talk about the first 3, 4, 5 years. They're not making that transition like they used to, and it could be heat and thus climate change. But I'd really like to bring in some expertise at the next meeting. So whether we order trees through Ashland County or not, we have a better idea of what to consider. But I'd also like to talk about what Ashland County is ordering for trees and if they make the most sense in light of, and when I say sense, I'm talking about success rate, survival rate. I'd rather plant a smaller tree with a high success ratio than what I've been doing. The bigger ones, I'm having very little success on surviving. And, you know, so if at least we could get options, and then maybe from the DNR Forestry in Hayward, I know you got to order larger quantities, but I'm leaning that way right now, just so I can get the smaller trees that I think might be a better fit, but I'm not sure I know enough to know if that makes sense. And maybe we can get some trees from there and then split those out for folks up here.
George?
Yeah, just to briefly second Pat's request. It's just gossip, but I was kind of surprised in conversation with a retired forester who's worked in Ashland and Iron and Sawyer counties, that they live locally, but they go to another county to get their tree stock for planting, because I don't know if it's accurate or not, but the said was that what we're selling doesn't have substantial enough root system versus the tops. So I don't know if that's right or wrong, but I think Pat's idea of having someone come in and give us some expertise would probably be a good idea.
So what I do know is we've been running our tree sale for 27 years. We've had maybe 1 or 2 landowners that have talked about low success rates or challenges. And from the nurseries, I've been told from the nurseries that seedlings, 1 and 2 year seedlings, which are tiny trees, anywhere from 4 to 10 inches tall, they have about a 20 to 30% success rate, versus transplanted trees are upwards of 70% success rates. So that's coming directly from a nursery. You know, I could ask a forester. I mean, I don't have the expertise to know. I'm not running test plots at my house, but that's the statistics that I've received from nurseries. And we do offer both. We do sell seedlings, red and white pine seedlings. We also sell transplant trees for larger planting stock. We found that the majority of our landowners now are preferring transplant trees. So they want bigger trees, bigger planting stock. However, these people are probably planting 20, 30, 40 trees versus Pat, who's planting acres of trees. So we also have to figure out, who are we catering to? And we cannot buy from the DNR nursery. So no, the county government cannot buy from them. So we've tried to buy from them in the past. We're not able to. Those are available for private landowners. Otherwise, we're competing with the DNR state nursery.
Yeah, I don't think that the alternate source was a different county, not the DNR state nursery. So we do have county forestry resources. So it's a different fellow, but the fellow that's come out to my property is a guy named Avery Jenks, county forester. Maybe he could come and give us some insight.
Yeah, we've worked with him on other projects in the past. In the other counties, I mean, everybody sells a little bit different stuff. Like Iron County, they're selling some fruit species. We've decided not to sell fruit species here except for natives. But, people might order from other counties too, depending on what species other counties are selling. We do get a lot of landowners from all over the state. We even get landowners from Minnesota that are purchasing from our sale. So it doesn't really matter where people are located, who are ordering. And if landowners are looking for different type of planting stock than what we're selling, we do ask landowners every year what they're looking for, but we also can't accommodate every single request that is offered.
Pat?
I guess if you want to investigate, as you prepare an agenda item, I've looked into the tree planter, as you know, but I've had such low success on red pine of all things out in that higher sandy or loam soil that I'm not willing to consider having a tree planter out there yet, because if I can't get them to grow when I baby them, what happens if I use a tree planter? So when you mention the success rate of the smaller stuff, and I look at these stands, I'm thinking Spooner here, for example, where they've planted trees with a tree planter. If we get 20, 30% success rates, well, how do you use a tree planter to plant trees, acres of trees? If you've got those kind of numbers not surviving, where does that then leave us? And right now, I am literally not willing to consider using the tree planter until I understand what kind of trees to put in, and, that I feel comfortable pulling out land and doing that with. And I don't know the answer, but if you have a forester you can talk to, and are they using the tree planter and what works and doesn't work, I'd be really interested in hearing more about that.
Okay. Is that it for the updates then? On to other business, number 8. Hearing none. Schedule our next meeting date.
Looking out a couple months, that would put us at October 23rd. I would also like to combine this with a tour of our Act 157, our natural flood management demonstration projects that we've been working on the last couple years. So would you guys be interested in doing a project tour on the day that we'd have a short meeting? And then we would do a field tour. Field tour is probably gonna take a couple hours, at the least amount of time. I've offered tours in the past and we've had virtually no attendance in previous years. So if we want to do a tour, I'm happy to do it, but I want to make sure that people would be interested in doing that.
George?
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused. Will we be clear of our budget responsibilities by that time?
What's the question?
Will we be clear of our responsibilities on the approval of the budget at that point in time? We will be? Okay.
Yeah, we have to be, because this room's being used for elections, and so the county board will be asked to approve it by October 29th. And the notice in the paper, I believe, is administrative session, October 12th.
Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure this committee was done with our piece of the puzzle.
Mr. Chairman, I like the idea of a tour, Mary Jo. I'm very interested in it.
I'm in agreement.
Does that date look okay for you guys?
Repeat, please.
October 23rd, Wednesday, 9 a.m. Okay. That's our tentative date.
There'll be one the 29th.
Pat?
The 23rd should work for me, but I'm spreading 8 or 10 acres of acorns in October, so depending on when they're in, it'll be a 2-day event. So I'm trying acorns to grow trees now with a cone spreader and doing that. But I would ask if you're gonna try to line up some experts to have to a meeting, or maybe we do a separate meeting just on trees, and then try to invite the public too, that you might need some flexibility of pulling in some expertise, so that if the date does change, that we're aware that it might change if that's what it takes, if that's okay.
How many experts are you looking for? Because I can invite Avery to do a quick update, but if we want a separate meeting just for trees, then I'm gonna have to look at the budget to see, we only budgeted for 4 or 5 meetings a year. So if we want a separate meeting just for trees, I'm gonna have to see where
Or-
we are.
Or instead of the short meeting, we allow enough time for a meeting to cover trees, and then we go out on the tour. I'd be fine with, if we have to just take enough time for the meeting, if October 23rd works, and then do the tour.
Sure.
George?
What would be the prospective location? Would you do that like at White River Town Hall, or where would you locate this meeting?
I would probably have the meeting here so we can have it on Zoom and everything, and then we would arrange for transport from here, whether I organize a BART bus or something like that.
Jerry?
Isn't it gonna be on the 157 is concerning the Marengo River, right? Okay. I would assume, I think you could probably get White River Town Hall to have a meeting there and go on with a tour from there like we planned a few years ago.
Yes, we would not have capability for any recording though, like this, or video screens, which is required now for our meetings.
You use the word required. We've been doing on Zoom and recording, but you could check with the administrator, but I believe if we had a meeting down there, it should still be fine. The internet was out, I don't know, a few months back, and we did a meeting without Zoom.
Carisha, do you know what is basically standard operating procedure now for all departments? Because didn't you say we have to run, every department has to kind of run their meetings the same way now? utilizing like the online. Do you know if we could have a meeting that's at a location that it's not recorded? If there's no internet? Okay, so I do think we are, the departments are required to start hosting their meetings in the same process.
Yeah, if you did want to talk to the administrator, you could. The public notice would have to specify the location, but if you really wanted to go there, you could talk to the administrator. I think legally we can do it. I'm looking at it that way. But if the administrator says, yeah, for this, fine, but normally we're going to be in here doing it this way
Yeah,
at this site. But if you really wanted to do it there, I think legally we can. Just the notice has to reflect it.
okay.
Okay, I feel, yeah, we should be setting up here, meeting and, don't wanna change, in mid-stride here until, we really know what's going on, so until then, is that, that's it, we got our meeting date set? And the time? Looks like, we'll make a motion to adjourn. Jerry, second
I'll second.
by Gary, all in favor?
Yes.
Adjourned.